Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Humanity Chats. Hi, I am Margie March, your hostess with the mostest, an author, visionary, and consultant, and I'm welcoming you to our show today. We have Reverend Dr. Keith McDaniel joining us, and this man is on fire. Before we bring him from the green room, I am going to read a little bit about him. Well, the Reverend Dr. M. Keith McDaniel Sr. is dynamic, relevant, uplifting, and innovative. Those are some of the words often used to describe his ministry. He's a passionate preacher and teacher of the gospel. He currently serves as the pastor of the 1,500 member Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. Since his calling by God to Macedonia, over 800 souls have joined this congregation. He has run campaigns, he has ministered to people, young and old, and you know what? He has embarked on a $2.5 million project, which included additional classes for Christian education, a family life center, a new parking, a new fellowship hall. Dr. McDaniel is an honor graduate of Shaw University, where he majored in religion and philosophy and minored in business management. He continued graduate and postgraduate studies at Duke Divinity School in Durham, North Carolina, and at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. He is also an adjunct professor of African American Religious Studies at USC Upstate. And guess what? An author of two books, Live Your Kingdom Life Now. And his most recent book he's going to talk about today, Till the War is Won. You will be amazed at the nuggets that are going to come from Dr. McDaniel. So if you're here, share this with your friends. Invite your people to join us. Welcome to our YouTube viewers, our podcast listeners, Facebook. We enjoy having you week after week. But I'm telling you, this conversation is going to be powerful. So tell a friend to tell a friend. And at this time, we're going to go check that green room to find Dr. McDaniel so that he can come drop those nuggets. Again, this is Humanity Chats with Margie. We do this on Thursdays. We get together and talk about everyday issues that impact humans. Let's go. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, how are you this evening?
Well, I'm very well. Thank you for asking. I cannot wait to get our conversation started. I read your book, and oh my goodness, Till the War is Won.
The war is won.
Yes. Welcome to Humanity Chats, Dr. McDaniel. What we do is usually we try to break the ice. I know we don't need to do that with you, but we want to learn something about you that we're not going to find in either of your books or online. So please share 3 fun facts with us.
3 fun facts?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's see. Number one, I love action movies. I am a big fan of the Marvel hits, and so I loved all of those, Iron Man and Thor and Hulk, Incredible Hulk, and all of that. So I'm a big action movie buff. Love the Marvel classics as well. I guess second fun fact, I feel like a lonely Duke fan. In South Carolina. I mean, this is Gamecock, Clemson territory. And so I feel like a lone Duke fan. Anytime I see someone with a Duke hat or a Duke T-shirt, I stop them and ask them what their name is and want to hug them and all of this stuff. And then number 3, I absolutely love hot tubs. I will sit in a hot tub from sun up to sundown. You know, if you sit in the water too long, how your fingers get all pruned up and wrinkly. Yeah, they have to drag me out.
Wow. Well, Viewers, listeners, you just learned some things about Dr. McDaniel.
Yeah.
And I'm hugging you through the screen because I'm wearing Duke Blue today.
I'll take it.
Yes. Wow. About that hot tub. Okay.
Yeah, I love a hot tub. And this is the time of year. It's cold outside.
I know the weather just changed on us. It is getting cold out there. Yes. Well, Dr. McDaniel, you recently came out with your second book, which is doing so well, Till the War is Won. And my first question to you is, why did you write the book?
I wrote this book really as a means of therapy. I realized that we were living through this pandemic, living through 2020 was traumatic, right? It was one of those years where it was hard to breathe. And so I initially started writing just as a means of my own therapy, just to kind of document what I was going through, what I was sensing, what I was feeling, and where my faith was finding its footing, in a time that seemed to be really uncertain. And so that's why I started to write it. And the more we got deeper into the year, it just seemed like it was a battle of sorts that was going on. It was one thing after the next. And so I wrote it as a means of really therapy for myself to kind of document my own thoughts and feelings. But the more I wrote, I realized that it could be a blessing and a benefit to others.
Well, why Psalm 27?
There were two scriptures throughout the year that I kept going back to. One was Isaiah 41:10, where God talks about not being afraid, but because he will be with us and he'll be our God and he will strengthen us and uphold us with his right hand. And then it was Psalm 27, and the Lord is my light and my salvation. And it seemed to be one of those Psalms that I kept coming back to because it has a variety of emotions in it, right? The Psalm 27 goes from confidence to being afraid, to having reservations, to landing at a place where the writer says in Psalm 27, I almost fainted. I would have fainted unless I believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And so that verse in the Psalm really, to me, was the apex of what it meant to be a child of God. There's enough in all of our lives that comes against us that, all of us have the testimony. We've been through enough. We can pinpoint a time and date when we could have thrown in the towel. Right. But something in us kept us going. And Psalm 27 was one of those texts for me in 2020.
Truly. Now, viewers, listeners, this is Dr. McDaniel. He's sharing about his book, Till the War is Won, and the nuggets that are in there, his writing process. You don't want to miss this. And if you have a friend who would benefit from this, please share the link, the YouTube link, or the Facebook link, or the podcast link. It's available on all major podcasts. Share it with your network. And if you're watching, and I see that a lot of you are watching, drop it in the chat room, drop it in the comments. Let's see where you're watching from, and do give some applause to Dr. McDaniel as he goes ahead answering these questions. Now, the title of the book, Till the War is Won. How did you come about that title? Why did you choose that?
Because it seemed to be future forward in its thinking. Mm-hmm. That there's something that needs to be held on. There's something that should remain until this war is won. And so for me, coming through 2020, it started out being about the pandemic, right? In the United States, we started hearing about this in February or so. And I'm a pastor. And so many of the shutdowns across our country and churches in particular started happening in March. And it was one thing after the next, but 2020 just wasn't about the pandemic, right? It was also about the political unrest, the social unrest, And so all of those things seem to have a synergy that felt distasteful, uncomfortable, all those things colliding at the same time. And as a person of faith, there's this battle that's always ongoing. And until this war is won, in the back of the book, there's actually a 21-day opportunity for daily affirmations. And so at the end of the book, toward the end of the book, each day, I give an opportunity for people to write the daily reflections, and it's connected to a particular Bible verse. And when you put it all together, it just simply reads, till the war is won, I am grateful for the protection of God in my life. See, until this thing is over, I'm going to always be grateful for the protection of God in my life. Till the war is won, I'm going to believe that today I will watch for and welcome the good. My desires are manifesting on schedule. I will always look up because God is the lifter of my head. So until the war is over, until the battle is won, these are the things that I strive to do daily.
Well, the things that you strive to do daily. And as I read your book, I noticed that you gave people the opportunity to reflect on each chapter and to journal and to, even write affirmations into their own lives. You shared your COVID-19 journey with your family. Do you wanna relate how the COVID-19 experience with your family ties into the war?
Sure, absolutely. So my wife tested positive for COVID, and trying to quarantine in the same space is extremely difficult. We slept on two different levels of the house. We ate dinner at the same time, but in two different rooms. And I tested negative. She tested positive. And so spending 2 weeks in the same house, but in two different spaces, was incredibly challenging, and every day she had all the symptoms, the loss of taste, the fever, fatigue, all of it, and every day she got up and she watched the news, and she saw the number of people who tested positive, but then she also saw the number of people who lost their lives to COVID. And she wondered if she would be a part of that number, and to listen to her have that worry day in and day out was tough. And so, we prayed and we kept each other encouraged, and praise God, she came through on the other side of that. So, I do understand those who have had to deal with COVID firsthand. There's a lot of people out there who think that this is somehow a hoax and that it's not real. COVID is real. And I think many of us know someone who's had COVID, have buried someone that we love because of this, have had our life routine altered because of this pandemic. And we're still here today. It's been a struggle and a battle, but we're still here.
Yes, we're here and we pray for God's protection. But, for you to share that part of your personal journey, I think it was so important for your readers to know that you were not just saying this because you had heard it somewhere, but this was something that your family had actually experienced. And that's why you made decisions to get vaccinated.
That's
so
right.
you did it to save yourselves and also to save the people around you. And so that war, unfortunately, we're still in that war because COVID is still here with us, despite the vaccines that are available. And so thank you for sharing that and for sharing those notes at the end of the chapter where readers can actually go through and yes, and find comfort in those words.
Yeah, at each chapter. So the book is really designed in a way that I share my thoughts, and then I allow the reader to think through and document their own. So at the end of each chapter, there are questions, reflection questions, there's an opportunity to journal, and then there's an action step. So it's really meant to be interactive.
Yes, it is interactive because, there were some things that I read in the book that I thought, okay, I'm gonna steal that. Yes, you talked about being color brave, and I thought, oh my goodness, because I'm one of those people who is all about my Black girl magic, and
That's right.
so I said, yes, I'm going to be my authentic self and be color brave. So thank you for giving us those powerful words in there that we can latch on.
Words like that are in the ethos. I've heard many people say, you need to be color brave, not color blind. So I don't take any credit for that phrase itself, because I hear many people saying it. But it was important to remind my daughter of that, particularly, that it's important to be color brave. I teach a number of courses at the university here in Spartanburg, and one of the courses I teach is an African American religion course. And I asked the question, particularly to Black students, in this country, we've been led to believe that God is white. And here's the question: if God is white, and now you want us to be colorblind, so here's the question: what can a white colorblind God do for Black people? And the only thing I can come up with is further oppress you. and so, to be color brave is important. God made us all in the various shades that he made us in, and we should be proud of that.
He made us in his own image.
That's right.
And so, and this is something that I see. I respect those who have images of God as being white, in the same way that my image of God is that he is like me.
That's
or
right.
He is like my ancestors. In that same way that I have a Santa that looks like me. It's all part of being color brave, and also accepting where you're from. And you also touched on our ancestors, and how that really spoke to me, because I have seen in the history books. I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa, so I have seen in the history books, and I have been told about the royalty, the kings, the riches, the gold,
That's right.
the bauxite, and all the riches that back in the day was in the land. And so thank you for sharing all that in your book.
I just think it's important, especially for young Black and brown children, to know that their genesis does not begin in suffering and oppression. That's how it is often approached and taught in public school system, but that's not actually true. Our story does not begin in the Middle Passage. It does not begin on plantations in the South. We come from a royal people who developed mathematics and religion and science and astrology and built civilizations and domesticated animals many hundreds of years ago.
Well, thank you for touching on that Black excellence. Now we have folks watching and commenting. We have Lanisha saying our story does not begin in the Middle Passage. Yes. And Wadia said, wow. Yes, Kola is saying absolutely right. And we have Ofori Jeku Jane watching us from Morrisville, North Carolina. She says she loves Psalm 27. Thank you to everybody who has tuned in. We have Dr. McDaniel with us, and he is the author of Till the War is Won. In his book, he gives action steps on how to live your life, how to affirm your journey, how you can journal. He uses his own examples from his own life to motivate others. And it's not all happiness. There've been sickness. There've been times where, especially during COVID. Tell us about what quarantine did to church.
So one of the things I started doing early on in the pandemic is I went back to some old Bible studies that I taught Macedonia, the church that I'm blessed enough to serve, in 2019. I spent about 6 or 8 weeks in 2019 teaching Macedonia about doing relevant and impactful ministry, right? This is 2019. You couldn't have told me in 2019 that teaching was not cutting edge, right? And then 2020 hit. And then I went back and I read all of those Bible study notes, and I immediately saw the holes in the teaching. What I noticed was it was good stuff as long as you have a building to pull it off. So everything I was teaching them about being a relevant church, about being an impactful ministry, needed a building to pull it off. None of it was any good in March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. None of it, because all of it required the building. And so, it was amazing to me. I looked at it and I laughed, and I said to myself, I guess that's what happens when you read customer service books and then try to apply that to the church. It's, as long as the door is open and the lights are on, it works, and it's just a reminder that the church is an organism, not an organization. It is a living thing. It is alive. It is not brick and mortar. And so I had to adjust, pastoring during this pandemic, preaching to empty pews and preaching to a camera allowed me to really focus on the craft of preaching without the energy and the distraction of people, right? Preaching is for people. But I spent 6 or 7 months, Margie, preaching to lint and dust and pews, right? And so it gave me an opportunity to kind of work on my craft. And I'll tell you what, one of the beautiful things that I realized is that empty spaces have just as much value as spaces with content. That if you take a cartoon or a painting, or an artist has put something on canvas, right? The places where there is content only have their definition because there are places on that same frame that do not. And so the value of empty spaces, the value of silence went up for me in preaching in the pandemic. I learned how to incorporate the silence into the preaching itself. I would have never had an opportunity to do that without this pandemic.
So as you're talking about how you had to adapt to your preaching style, I noticed that you have a lot of references in your book, not just Bible verses, but references from, learned material. How long did it take for you to do that research, to finish the book? And did you have to change your writing style?
I did. It was different for me. So this is my third book. My first book was Live Your Kingdom Life Now, and my second book is a book called If God Be For Us: Pastoral Reflections on Faith and Family Concerning the Black Church. And then this book is different in the sense that I was more transparent in this book than I was in the two previous. I didn't share a lot of stories. I shared some stories, but this book, I really talked in depth about, my own thoughts, my own fears, my own disappointments, my own joys, my own inspirations. And so I drew from that in writing this particular book. That was a different writing style for me. It was a different writing style for me to use Psalm 27 as a launching pad, but not necessarily and specifically work to exegete Psalm 27. So it's not Till the War is one is not an exegetical work on Psalm 27. Psalm 27 really is the launching pad. It was the anchor that for me guided me through those uncertain months of 2020. And so it was different trying to write and research and think in real time. Because, one of the things that became apparent to me is that, everybody doesn't live through a pandemic. And, our country hasn't had a pandemic to this degree since 1918, Spanish flu. Right. And so those of us who are living during this pandemic and will ultimately be living post-pandemic will have a document such as this book where we have been able to chronicle our thoughts and our feelings and our actions and our motivations during a season in life that for many of us, we had to build a plane and fly it at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's deep. Thanks to everybody who's watching. Deku Jane said the value of silence, the value of empty spaces. That is so true. And Lamisha is saying the church is an organism, not an organization. Yes, that is good, Pastor McDaniel. Yes. Thank you. Thanks to everybody who is following this conversation. If you have not read Dr. McDaniel's book yet, it is available everywhere books are sold. Check your local independent bookstore. Go online to Amazon. It is he has the Kindle version and the paperback version. Till the War is Won. Till the War is Won. And the stories in there are relatable. He talks about the protest, the importance of protesting, even when you're a Christian. Now, Dr. McDaniel does not sanction destroying of property. No. But he talks about the importance of protesting as it was done in the Bible to achieve change. There's so many things in the book that you would have to read it, to know it, to understand it. So find it. As I'm talking about the topic of protesting, you did mention that in the book. How do you relate that to the war that you are alluding to?
I was so encouraged by the protests of the summer of 2020. It did my heart good to see young people out there being willing to put such a heavy burden on their shoulders. Now, I do want to say that the media, by design and by intention, used language like protesters and rioters as if they were interchangeable. The two are not the same, right? Protesters and rioters are not one and the same. And so I do not support the destruction of property, vandalism. I don't support any of that. But I do support the protest. I do support people screaming to the top of their lungs and demanding change. I do support speaking truth to power. I do support the fact that there are systemic issues that need to be addressed and will only be addressed unless someone else tells a different story. There's a saying that if the lion does not survive, then the hunter gets to tell the story. And we all know what kind of stories a hunter will tell if the lion is not there to tell their part, right? A hunter will exaggerate. A hunter will put 100 on 10. This happened and this happened and this happened. And he knows that's not true, but who's gonna tell a different story because the lion didn't survive? Protest is the lion surviving and countering the story that the hunter wants everybody to believe. And so it did my heart good to see people protesting, to see people standing up for their rights, to see people demanding change. And in this country, change has been slow and change has been resisted by the powers that be. And so it was good to see that in 2020, that it wasn't just us that were crying for justice. It wasn't just Black and brown people in the streets. It wasn't just Black and brown people marching and protesting, but I saw people of all ethnicities participating in the process, and it did my heart good. It's not hard to look through the Bible and see that God affirms protests, whether you're in the Old Testament or whether you're in the New Testament. The three Hebrew boys who ended up in Nebuchadnezzar's fire, they ended up in that fire because they were protesting. They refused to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's image. That's a protest. Daniel ended up in the lion's den because he was protesting. He refused to obey the decree that he was not supposed to pray. He kept praying and ended up in a lion's den. When Jesus got up out of that grave, he was protesting his own death. The state killed a man, and 3 days later, he got back up. He was protesting. He was protesting.
Now, now that's Jesus was protesting.
He was protesting. That's right. It's a protest.
Oh wow, I never thought of it that way, but thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
But Jesus was protesting.
He was protesting. He was standing up. They demanded that he lay down, and he got back up.
Yeah, Jesus did get back up in 3 days. Viewers, listeners, we're open to your questions, your comments. Drop that in there. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. McDaniel is telling us about his book, Till the War is Won. Till the War is Won. Now, Dr. McDaniel, I have a question. How long did it take for you to finish the book?
I started writing in February of 2020, and I spent every day just writing thoughts. You're a writer, so you know that process. You got scribble, you start writing these random thoughts, and then the more you write, the more you think, it starts to kind of come together. So I spent probably a good part of the year of 2020 writing, thinking, rewriting to come to the manuscript that we have now. And so it was an everyday process. I used sermons, that I preached during that time. So some of that kind of came back and ended up in the manuscript. And so I spent the good part of the year writing, thinking, and rewriting.
That must have taken a chunk of your time, but you did it, and you shared your testimony with the world. Viewers, listeners, as I said earlier, Till the War is Won is available everywhere books are sold. Don't miss out on that opportunity to read it and get nourished for yourself. Dr. McDaniel, do you have a copy of the book next to you?
I do.
Can you please honor us with a reading?
Sure. We were just talking about the protest, so I will just read a bit of it. This is chapter 2. Chapter 2 of the book is called The Talk. And I deal with, in this particular chapter, that Christianity in itself is a religion of resistance and not power. And I unpack that in that chapter. But there's a part in this chapter where I talk about facts versus feelings. So I'll read a little bit of that. As protests and demonstrations continued across the country, sparked by the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, parents were being forced to talk to their children about the protests they were seeing on television, as well as the events that led to them. One morning while preparing for school, my 8-year-old daughter, Kinsley, asked me a most heartbreaking question. Every morning, we watched the local news followed by the national news. During the summer months of 2020, the national news storyline was consumed with narratives of police brutality. After watching the news coverage of George Floyd's murder and the tragic deaths of Breonna Taylor, my 8-year-old daughter looked at me and said, "Daddy, why do the police only kill us?" Race, along with death and sex, are those difficult subjects parents often are nervous to have with their children. I often wonder at what point would Kinsley begin to process the fact that the world was not as safe for her as it was for some of her friends. As a father of four, Kinsley being the youngest, this was not my first time having this conversation. Her three older siblings were aware of and had experienced the pain of racism, both in individual and systemic ways. With each child, it seems that they are younger and younger when I've had to have the talk. We are a people who need to have two different talks with our Black offspring, one about why we're here and the other about why it's not always a promised land for people who look like us. I wondered at what point the constant image of Black death on national news would begin to make her feel inferior or afraid to live in the body God had blessed her with. 2020 was a year Kinsley, 8 years old, began processing death and dying, not simply because of the virus of COVID, but the virus of hatred. My heart broke into many pieces as she asked the question. I heard the fear in her voice. Her question hit like a weight because I realized there was only so much I could protect her from as a father. As a father, I believe it my duty to protect my family. And I've concluded that the only way to protect my children from racism is to help them understand that it exists and that it is opposite of God's heart, as well as giving them the tools necessary to recognize it and reminding them that they must refuse to allow it to define how they see themselves. I reminded Kinsley that morning that she was a part of God's beautiful creation. We prayed, and off to school she went. When she got home, we watched Beyonce's work, Black is King, which is a visual album which reimagines the story of the Lion King for a new generation who may be in search of meaning, even crowns. The film is about the journey of Black families through time, paying careful attention to the power and spiritual significance of their ancestors. The film highlights the rich traditions of Black excellence, full of images of Black beauty, accented by images and stories that celebrate Black legacy, Black power, and Black pride. The film was extremely uplifting and seemed to bring balance to our day. Music is extremely powerful, and it is not limited to Christian faith. Gospel music is not the only music that can inspire the soul. To use Danny Mullen's word, music impacts all of humanity because all of humanity has been embedded with music. Music is about patterns and the anticipation of harmony and melody. I listen to all kinds of music. I shared my experience on social media that evening. I made a social media post about my daughter's questions, my feelings about her questions, and the balance the film brought to our day. And to my surprise, a ministry colleague, who happens to be white, responded with a post that sought to disprove Kinsley's question. The colleague posted statistics on my social media page of the number of people shot to death by the police in the United States from 2017 to 2020 by race. The colleague was quick to point out the fact that more white people were killed by police than Blacks. I was outraged. First, because the statistics were flat numbers that do not take into consideration that Black people only represent 13.4% of the US population. Based on this, African Americans are 2.4 times more likely to be killed by police than their white brothers and sisters. Therefore, the stats presented actually drive home the point little Kinsley was feeling. Second, the second reason why I was outraged was because I didn't need facts, especially facts that meant little when placed in proper context. What I needed was for a person who I thought understood the challenges of systemic racism and racial bias to feel my pain as a father. There are times when we enter into conversations concerning injustice and people want to talk about facts and dismiss feelings or the experiences of another human being. If we only needed more facts, Jesus would have never come. How many times have you found yourself disconnected with people you love because you were trying to prove a fact rather than trying to understand their feelings?
Wow. That was deep. Um, yes, and I'm sorry that your colleague felt the need to come on your social media wall to point out those facts with you without actually looking at the percentages. I think that sometimes people may not mean harm, but they may not really understand what they're saying, or they're oblivious of what is going on. And so it is up to us and our allies to help broaden the lens so that people can understand better. And it's unfortunate that it doesn't just apply to people who don't look like us.
That's
There are
right.
even people who look like us who
Absolutely.
don't understand. And so it's a matter of all of us coming together and being objective and seeing the true story for what it is. So thank you for sharing this reading with us. Um, is your
Absolutely.
book available at the local bookstore as well?
It's available at any bookstore nationwide. If they don't have it in the bookstore, they can certainly order it for you. It's available on Amazon, Kindle, or you can Barnes and Nobles, anywhere where you buy books, you can find the book.
Yes, yes. Viewers, listeners, you heard. You can find the book anywhere books are available online. Thank you, Miranda, for joining us. We appreciate you as well. If you know someone who missed this conversation and will benefit from it, it's available on Margie TV, YouTube. You can share it with them. You can share it on Facebook, and you can always listen to any of the major podcasts. Um, Dr. McDaniel is going to keep talking about this book. We will provide you with updates of possible speaking engagements that he may have elsewhere, because there is so much to talk about that we cannot condense into this brief period that we have together. And so we will keep you posted, and buy the book, read it, look at the instructions at the end of each chapter. It will uplift your spirits, and you may not even agree with everything in the book, but you know what, it's all part of broadening our lens. If you don't agree with what is in the book, you can let Dr. McDaniel know what you don't agree with, and he can explain that to you. Now, I would not be doing right if I don't mention anything about Dr. McDaniel's church. He is the senior pastor at Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. The website is on the ticker. For those that are listening, I would have to say that to you is mmbcsc.org. mmbcsc.org. Look up Macedonia. You will find some of his preachings on there. And who knows, you may be able to visit the church virtually if you're watching from out of South Carolina, or you could go in person to visit him. Now, before we leave, this has been a conversation that has been very worth our time. But before we leave, do you have any additional words of inspiration for our listeners and viewers?
I do. I would just remind them, and I speak to this a little bit in the book, that that good can come out of bad. And so I encourage you to dig deep within yourself and to find the things that inspire you, and use your imagination and incorporate what you see, the good, the great, the powerful things that God has placed in your spirit and placed in your being. See yourself achieving that, and believe that God will allow it to come to pass in your life. As a writer of Psalm 27 says, I would have fainted unless I believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I believe it for you, that you will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. So be encouraged.
Well, be encouraged, regardless of your race, religion, wherever you're watching from. Don't be afraid to achieve.
That's right.
We thank you all for joining us tonight. Next week, we're coming to you. It's Veterans Day week. We will have Judge Erica McGimsey join us, and we will also have a gentleman. His name is Victor Kwanzer. He trained at Harvard Law School, and he talks about the future of Blackness. He talks about the past, the present, and the future. You would not want to miss both episodes. We have 2 episodes for you next week. We will be back with our regular timing of 20 to 25 minutes per episode. We had to do justice to Dr. McDaniel today because we talked about his book, and then he had the uplifting message for us. So no matter where you are, one thing Dr. McDaniel talks about in his book is our humanity. That's what connects us. We're human, regardless of your race, religion, wherever you are. And so his message is for all. Thank you so much, Dr. McDaniel.
Thank you for having me this evening. I have enjoyed this conversation with you.
Yes. And thank you so much for the honor as well. Remember, most importantly, Till the War is Won is available everywhere books are sold. Now, you can always check back on the blog to read about Dr. McDaniel. His bio is up there on margiemarge.com. You can visit Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church to learn more about his church. Visit their website or go in person. And we really appreciate you. We hope to see you again next week. I see that our viewers are still commenting. Robin said, great. Thank you, Wadia. Amen. Thanks, everybody. We're so sorry we couldn't highlight you all, but we know that you love us and we love you back, and we will see you next week. Now, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you and have a good night.
Good night.